you got 160,000 Twitter followers, and you found 36 nasty people who put racist comments up there. Do you think that really tells a story of the way average Americans are feeling about a story like this?
Well, we live in a system, Mike, of white supremacy. Now, that's either correct or incorrect, Mike.
We live in a system of white supremacy. What do you mean by that?
That means that we live in a system, meaning that people who choose, and not all white people are white supremacists, let's be very clear, but people who choose to practice
magnanimous of you.
Oh, yeah. But people who choose to practice white supremacy choose to dominate and control and mistreat people who are classified as non-white. Now, that's either correct or incorrect, Mike.
Well, and there's also the argument and the assertion made that there are plenty of black Americans who treat white people with disgust and contempt and are racist and treat white people with utter disregard based on their own racial prejudices. Is that correct or incorrect?
That's outside of name calling. There is no systematic black racism nowhere.
Outside of name calling there. So if a black guy comes along and beats the stuffing out of somebody because they're white and says, because I'm doing this because you're white, I hate white people. That happened in Brooklyn the other day, happened in Chicago last week. We saw a guy dragged out of his car. I mean, we see black on white violence regularly. How do you address that? What do you say about that, Tariq Nasheed?
Because it's not systematic. That black person is immediately punished when they are found. You do not have black people walking around free who harm or kill white people like you have white supremacist suspects walking around free for killing people like Eric Garner, Tamir Rice, other people like that. That is systematic.
Yeah, I mean, and of course, the Eric Garner case and all of those cases that we've examined and explored and discussed ad nauseum, we get back to a basic premise, and maybe we can end it on this premise, and I'm interested in your take on this. The argument is if people, regardless of their race, would not fight an officer or resist or run or flee or act violent or confrontational to a police officer, many of the people who wind up dead would still be alive today. Is that a fair proposition to you?
No, that's the I'm white and I say so rule. And that's where we go to implications.
I'm white and I say so. Okay. So if a black officer kills a black guy for fighting back, what argument does he use?
Well, I mean, that rarely happens. And also, it's really rare that a black officer kills a white person.
Rarely happens. It happens all the time. What do you mean it rarely happens? You don't think black officers are killing black suspects in the streets of America?
I'm talking about unarmed people. Unarmed people who are not really committing a crime. The crime itself is blackness, resisting arrest, mouthing off to a cop. Stuff like that gets black people killed.
Do you honestly believe, and this is what the crux of this, because I'm always fascinated by the mindset of somebody who feels the way you do. Do you think white cops just go around and want to kill black suspects just because?
No. The FBI in 2006 put out a memo saying that white supremacist groups have infiltrated law enforcement. So now what you have are a bunch of white supremacist race soldiers pretending to be cops.
A bunch.
Shooting people in the back is not police work.
How do you define a bunch?
Killing a person and lying like Ray Tensing did on the police report, that's not a cop. There's nothing in the police.
Right. Well, there's lots of bad cops. There's no question about it. There's lots of bad radio hosts. There's lots of bad insurance agents. There's bad people in every category. But when you say a bunch, what do you mean by that, Tariq Nasheed? What does a bunch of white supremacist cops mean? 10%, 20%, 50%, 80%?
Unfortunately, many of the white supremacists are not letting us know who they are. When the FBI put out that report, that they didn't let us know how
that'll
many
be
they
tricky.
are.
That'll be tricky. So that's going to be really hard to solve it. So what do you think is the solution here?
We have to suspect some people are just white supremacists.
Right, suspect, and wouldn't that be a gross disservice to somebody if you suspect somebody of being a white supremacist when they're not, or is that irrelevant to you?
No, if they prove that they're not, that's fine. But if they have certain actions that make you suspect that they're white supremacists, you should have every right to be on your best guard and be cautious around them.
So what do you believe? I'm sure you're a guy of solutions, as I like to be. What do you think the solution is to some of the challenges we're facing right now with regards to race in America?
Right. Well, there's no challenge. We're completely dominated by white supremacy. See, we can't minimize that by saying there's a challenge. So what we have to do, we have to come up with ways to replace the system of white supremacy with a system of justice.
How do we do that?
What we're going to have to do, start punishing some of these race soldiers by saying, well, there's bad cops and there's bad people in law enforcement, but you don't punish them. That's giving them the wherewithal to keep doing what they're doing.
So like the officer who shot the guy in South Carolina, who's now facing probably the rest of his life in prison. That's why. Was that an aberration that they're punishing him, or the guy they shot the kid in the parking lot of the gas station when he was reaching for his driver's license, and that guy went to jail for a lot of years? Are those aberrations, or why are those cops being punished?
I mean, that's very rare. As a matter of fact, when cops do get punished for killing a black person, a lot of times they don't get no more than 5 years in prison.
But part of the problem is social commentators like you take a case like Eric Garner, or I'll bet you even Trayvon Martin. You probably think Trayvon Martin was a victim, right? You think Eric Garner is a victim. These guys weren't victims. These are guys who perpetuated confrontational aspects of what led to their ultimate death.
So, sir, basically, you're throwing out the Constitution because Eric Garner should not have been killed according to the Constitution. He should have had equal justice under the law. He should have had due process under the law.
You're a smart guy. You don't believe that an officer intended to kill Eric Garner in Staten Island, do you?
He was killed, and the officer wasn't punished. And
that's not what I asked you. Do you believe those police officers intended to kill him?
When they choked him, it looked like they did. Now, I'm suspecting that. I don't know because there has not been a trial, but the man is dead.
No, there was an autopsy released, and they said that there were a variety of factors that contributed to his death, including his obesity and his health problems.
No, sir. They said it was a homicide, sir. We cannot be disingenuous.
No, I'm not. I'm being very specific, and words matter. His specifically, according to the autopsy report, and you're right, it was determined to be a homicide, and because of and there was pressure put on his back and all of that. There were cops on top of him, and you well know that there were contributing factors, including his obesity and his diabetes and his other health problems.
And I'm white and I say so, which is the problem with systematic white supremacy.
So you could that's your get out of jail card argument to everything. Well, I'm white and I say so. Well, let me guess, the coroner was white?
But that goes back to the Supreme Court ruling of Dred Scott. The Supreme Court ruling said a black man has no rights that a white man is bound to respect.
Okay,
because
I got you. Tariq Nasheed, I appreciate very much you coming on the show because, again, it's important to me to hear all sides of an argument. Maybe we'll get you back again. I'm a little frustrated with the I'm white and you're not argument, but so be it. Your Twitter did get a lot of attention, and frankly, I'm glad we had the conversation so that people could hear exactly what it is you had to say. Tariq Nasheed, who is, again, an author and a film producer and has his podcast called The Tariq Elite Show. That's an interesting approach. I'm white and I say so. Okay, end of argument. It's exactly like the racism argument. You're a racist.